everyone. Today we're going to talk about the negative side in policy debate and disadvantages and topicality. So first, starting out, when you are the negative, you have to wait and see what the affirmative team chooses to run. If you're in the novice division in Idaho, they have 5 choices of topic areas they can run, but you don't know what specifically they're going to do. So you have to prepare for all of the cases as the negative. One of the things that you can run as the negative is a disadvantage. And disadvantage, just like the word says, is a bad thing that's going to happen. So what are the disadvantages to you going to the movies tonight? Well, you could get hit by a car, you could lose your phone and can't contact your parents. Those same things exist in policy debate. You need to show that there's major disadvantages to passing the affirmative plan, and that's why we shouldn't do it. The world right now is fine without doing the affirmative world. If we do this affirmative plan, all of these bad things will happen. So a disadvantage has 4 cards and 4 parts to it. Make sure you're taking notes on this because you're going to be running and getting these ran against you a lot. So the first part of a disadvantage is called uniqueness. Uniqueness means what's going on in the world right now. It's kind of like the status quo. So uniqueness is usually saying this thing is happening, it's close to something bad, but that thing's not happening right now. An example, or it's often called the brink. So right now we're in a recession, but we're on the way out of it. So like this bad thing is kind of happening, but we're slowly getting away from the bad thing. Or we might be like on the verge, but we're not going to go over the edge of the cliff. So I have a visual I'm going to show you as I go through this. Okay, so this is Bob and the disadvantage. And this really is a really good description of how a disadvantage works. So uniqueness, that's Bob. He says, "Hi, I'm Bob. I might be close to the edge, but I'm not currently in any danger." Okay, he's right on the edge, but he's not falling over. He's not close to falling over. He's just right on the edge. Okay. Your next part of a disadvantage is called your link. A link is how the affirmative plan connects to this disadvantage. So it's like the next logical step in your disadvantage. So let's look at Bob. So in uniqueness, Bob was on the edge, but he's fine. In the link, all of a sudden we start to see a problem. This red guy just pushed Bob over the cliff, and then the bad things are going to start. So the link is what the affirmative does to trigger the bad things in this disadvantage. So let's say we are talking about how our courts, like judges and stuff, the courts are pretty full, but they can still run. By decriminalizing marijuana, it's going to lead to a lot more cases in court. As it stands, it doesn't sound like there's a problem. But if you can think what comes next, logically, there's a lot more cases in court. It's probably going to get overwhelmed. And when a court gets overwhelmed, people stay in jail for longer. So that would be our disadvantage. And it has all of those pieces. They all go in a logical sequence. So Bob's on the edge of the cliff. He's on the brink in uniqueness. The plan comes along and the plan pushes him over the cliff. That's our link. Our next part of a disadvantage is called the internal link. Your internal link is kind of like a connecting piece. It connects your link to the final part of the disadvantage, which is called an impact. So Bob just got pushed off the cliff by the affirmative plan. Now we have our internal link. Bob is falling, getting close to this big bad thing at the bottom, all these rocks and things. He's falling because he got pushed. So this is like this middle piece. You can't just go from him being pushed to him immediately being on the rocks because he has to fall. It's that middle connecting piece. And your last piece of your disadvantage is the impact. I like to say an impact is the big bad thing that's going to happen by doing the affirmative plan. So Bob got pushed off the cliff by the plan, right? So sad. Bob's free falling. The impact is that Bob died on the rocks. Poor Bob. Guess what? Bob could have been saved if the plan hadn't pushed him off the edge. So if we wouldn't have done this plan, Bob would still be comfortably on the cliff. That's why we shouldn't do the plan, so that we can save Bob's life, save him from dying on the rocks. That's the impact. So in our court's advantage or disadvantage, we have that the courts are fine. They're kind of crowded, but everything's on schedule. The plan is going to make the courts more crowded. When the courts are more crowded, our internal link would say that more people end up being in jail. Why does that matter, though? Why does it matter that more people are in jail? That's the impact. The impact would be that by more people being in jail, there's a more likelihood of suicide, or those people aren't able to make money for their families, or it prolongs justice. All of those are really bad things, right? Those are all the big bad things called impacts. So now let's talk about how to beat a disadvantage. Okay, so when a disadvantage happens, I flow it, uniqueness link, internal link, impact. I like to do an exclamation point on my flow for impact because it's easy. And every time I see an exclamation point on my flow, I know it means impact. So as the affirmative, you're like, oh, how am I going to attack this disadvantage? And in policy debate, you have to attack every single piece of evidence or argument on your flow. And so you need to attack the uniqueness and the link and the internal link and the impact. So when you're affirmative, let's see what we can do to attack uniqueness. Uniqueness. The courts are crowded, but they're still working on schedule. How could I attack that as the affirmative? I could say that this is non-unique. You want to use that wording. This is non-unique. The courts are not crowded the courts are not crowded. They're working at a quicker pace than they normally are. Or you could say this is non-unique. But by decriminalizing marijuana, we're not going to add more people, or it's not going to make, it's not going to push us over the brink. So non-unique, and then say how this isn't happening or how it's not happening, or we won't get pushed over the brink, excuse me. The next part is the link. You need to attack the link by saying no link. You want to say no link and then show how this link won't happen. So our link was by decriminalizing marijuana, it's going to lead to more people having cases in court. I would argue that by decriminalizing marijuana, it's actually going to decrease, or it's not going to lead to an increase in people in court. It's going to stay the same. Or I could say a link turn, or I will turn the link. And that means I'm going to show how it's actually going to do the opposite. So negative says it's going to increase the amount of people in court. I would say actually it's going to decrease the amount of people in court because those people won't be arrested in the first place for smoking marijuana or for possessing it. I'm going to turn it. It's no longer a bad thing. It's now a good thing. Okay. So either say no link or link turn. The next piece is internal link. So you want to say there's no internal link. You want to show how that connecting piece doesn't exist. Our connecting piece in our court's disadvantage was that more people in court leads to people in jail for longer amounts of time. I would say that one, because this isn't going to increase the people in jail, it's not going to increase the amount of time people are sitting in a jail cell. Or I could say, because it's actually going to decrease the amount of people in court, it's actually going to decrease the amount of people that are sitting in jail waiting for trial. The final part is the impact. So there's two options you can do to attack an impact. You can say there's no impact. This impact's not going to happen. It doesn't exist. Our impact was that, we had a few. So let's say that our impact is it's going to slow down justice. It's a bad thing, right? We could say that there's no impact. Justice is not going to be slowed down because we're not going to be adding people to the courts. There's not going to be more people in jail. This impact will not happen. Or you could turn the impact. You could say that we're actually going to speed up justice and make sure more people get justice because the criminalization of marijuana is inherently racist. More people of color are arrested for possessing and using marijuana than white people, even though white people use it at a higher rate. So we're actually going to be increasing justice because we won't have this racist system going along. So that's an impact turn. So a turn would mean, just the term turn is you're actually going to show how this bad thing is actually a good thing, okay? Or a good thing's a bad thing. And so you could link turn and impact turn. Also, if you do a turn and the other side does not answer that in their next speech, you should win the disadvantage. So if you put a link turn on your flow as the affirmative and the negative comes up and doesn't answer it, then you should win the disadvantage according to the rules of policy debate. So it's really awesome. You want to make sure you follow those rules. So as a negative, you present multiple disadvantages, and each disadvantage has a uniqueness, a link, an internal link, and an impact. As the affirmative, you answer them by saying, this is non-unique. There's no link or a link turn. There's no internal link. There's no impact or an impact turn. So that's how you would respond to those. You could use analysis, just your own words, analytics, or you can use evidence as well. I could say this is non-unique. Here's a piece of evidence that backs that up. That makes your arguments even stronger. If you don't have that evidence, however, you can just use your own words, but it's not going to be as strong as if you can say no link and then have a piece of evidence that backs that up. Okay? So those are the disadvantages. I'm going to record a separate video to talk about topicality. So the first part of the year as a novice on the negative, you can only attack their case specifically, run disadvantages, or run topicality. So we'll talk about that next.